I am back on my bed with another soft talking video. Last time I did one of these, which was, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, I had asked if anyone would be interested in a mental health video. And a few people said that they were interested, so I figured I would do that. I think I'm going to try to do some soft talking videos every so often. I really like these occasionally. Like if I'm getting ready or something, or if I'm just, taking a bath, I like to listen to soft talking videos, so hopefully some people enjoy these. So before I start with mental health, I do want to make it very clear I am not a professional in anything related to the mental health fields. I am just someone who has experienced a lot of mental health issues in my past and current, and I'm just very interested in it. So please, obviously, do your own research if you're interested further, and if you feel like you might be struggling, reach out to a professional, or call the hotlines. There are many. You don't have, if you feel like you are suffering with any harmful thoughts, you know what I mean? There are many hotlines you can call. If you don't feel comfortable calling, you can text. I'll try to link the ones that I've used in the past below, if I can find them. And I'll also, if I can link some therapists or some programs on there that are a bit more reasonably priced, I will, for anyone who needs. I also want to make it clear there is nothing to be ashamed of about getting help. You are not alone. It is not abnormal. It is a very common thing to struggle with mental health, especially in the last few years, even if you are not someone with a chronic mental health issue. Given the state of the world, it is not, it's very common to maybe need some help, whether it is through therapy or medication or meditation, whatever works for you. Don't be ashamed. So I'm going to start out with my mental health issues. This isn't like a pity party. I am very much in a better place right now. While I do struggle, I am unnecessarily, that's not the right word, I'm just unbelievably better than I have been in the past. This is also going to be about my mental health journey from the time I can remember to now at 27. So it will seem like a lot, and it honestly is, but please remember that some of it was a long time ago and I've recovered. Others, not as much, but we'll get into that. And obviously, trigger warning, self-harm, mental health, maybe abuse, I'm not sure. But we'll get into that. So, mental health issues does run in some of my family. I'm not going to get into that because that's their business, but it does. I do have the genetics for some stuff. But yeah. Ever since I was a kid, I have been very anxious. I remember being horrified of the thought of my family dying ever since I knew what it was. I didn't care so much about me dying necessarily, but I cared a lot about losing my parents. That was something that really, really made me anxious. I was also just an anxious person in general with very typical stuff. Even crossing the street would freak me out. Loud noises, definitely. And it caused me to struggle to sleep a lot too as a kid. I thought I had insomnia. I don't think it was insomnia though, but it was, I definitely struggled to sleep at some point during my younger years as a kid. Sometimes it would take me over 4 hours or 5 hours to fall asleep at times. But it really was just because I was so anxious and terrified of everything. Another thing that I struggled with was focusing. And I also, I struggled with mood swings, severe mood swings. Ever since I was a kid, I had an insane amount of fights with my parents because I would just snap and I couldn't control it. I didn't know what it was. I would just switch and be angry and just have this inner rage. And I would try so hard to keep it in. A lot of times these mood swings lasted my whole life until I learned what it was and got help for it, which I'll get into later. But they're things that I have dealt with my whole life, and I know that sometimes I knew that my moods weren't justified. My anger made no sense, and so I would try to keep it in, but that would just make me bottle it up, and I would get cold with people and snappy instead of blowing up, which didn't really make it better because they would still get offended and say that it was rude, obviously, and I always did that. I never knew what it was. I also had what I only learned what it was recently or last year is hypersensitivity. I deal with that a lot. Sometimes I want to be touched and hugged, and this has caused an issue with my family and pretty much every relationship I've been in. Sometimes if someone touches me and I'm in one of these, like I just, sometimes it causes so much sensitivity that it feels really almost painful. Sometimes it almost feels like I'm being burnt in a way. And I thought that was just a me thing up until very recently that I realized that it was actually part of a symptom that diagnosis that I have. But that caused a lot of issues because, especially in relationships, people will want to cuddle, and sometimes I couldn't stand the thought of being touched by anyone. Sometimes even my own touch really, really triggered me, and I hated it. And so sometimes I would kind of try to power through it, and I would be, in someone's arms, and it would just hurt, and I would be screaming in my head because I hated it. But I knew that that's not normal. I still struggle with that. I haven't really figured out how to deal with that. But it's something that at least I'm aware of, that it's not just a me issue, which really helps. For the longest time, I really thought that it was just me, and no one I really knew had that. I didn't know what it was called. I thought it was just me, and I sucked, and but I had that, and that obviously caused issues as a kid too. My parents would they would even tap my shoulder, and I'd freak out, and I know that is an issue, a symptom of autism, but that's all I knew. I knew that was a symptom of autism to not want to be touched. I have no other symptoms of autism, pretty much, so I didn't understand why I had that. It made no sense. But I did. Anyway. When I got older, towards, I guess, 11 years old, was when I started to feel depressed and self-conscious. I was bullied throughout my whole life in school. Through high school, I was severely bullied. But obviously, as I got closer to teenagers, my depression started with it more. And I ended up getting an eating disorder from it because I was just so self-conscious about myself that I thought I had to be skinnier. And I also it was my form of self-harm. It got to a point where every time I felt sad, which was every day, every time I felt hurt or mad or sad, I would take it out by purging. I was bulimic. So every time I felt sad, I would puke it out. I was never someone to cut myself. For me, that never really was a thing. I tried it a few times, but I felt more satisfied harming myself through bulimia by puking because I was getting the best of both worlds. I was distracting myself from my feelings by puking and crying on the floor and dealing with the pain of puking, because that does cause pain sometimes. And also I was trying to lose weight, so it worked for me. I was bulimic from probably 12 or 13 to my early 20s. I slowly got out of it in my early 20s, but I had some relapses. One time I relapsed so severely that I bursted a blood vessel in my eye right before starting a new job. So I went in with a huge red thing in my eye. It was that was fun. Yeah, but no, that was something, and I got help for it when I was 15, I believe. I was seeing the guidance counselor at my school, and she brought me to a hospital for teens, for youth, and they followed me and they got me a therapist, and they put me on medication. I was on Prozac, profluoxetine. I think I'm pronouncing that wrong, but anyway. So I was on that, and it didn't do anything, to be completely honest. Prozac was completely useless for me, and at that time I really thought that medication was useless, and I was 15, right? So I was just thinking it was some evil way for doctors to make money. I didn't care for it. I was only on it for about a year, and I just stopped because it did nothing. But while I was on it, I had to be followed. So I was seeing my guidance counselor weekly, my therapist weekly, and my doctor monthly. And they also all followed my school, and they saw my parents, and it was a big thing. I was severely depressed at the time as well. Like I said, I was being very bullied. I was in some very toxic relationships that some were abusive. I'm not going to get into details of it, but I was, some were very, very abusive. Okay, not some, just one specifically. Either way, though, I wasn't good. And at that time, I had even planned at the moment, I made a pact with myself. I did not want to kill myself while my parents were alive, but I had made a plan with myself to kill myself the moment they did. The moment they were gone, I was going to kill myself. I was living solely for them. I hated life. And that pact was in the back of my mind for my whole life after that. It never really left. Up until very late 20s, I'd say very recently, it's kind of something that I don't think I would do, but it is still sometimes in the back of my mind. I'll touch on that later, though. Sorry, this is a mess. There's a lot. Anyway, while I was seeing my doctors, like I said, they were following my schooling, and they noticed that I was failing some stuff, and with everything, they decided to test me for ADHD. At the time, they called it ADD. Now they're the same thing. It's ADHD or quiet ADHD. Most people just know of ADHD, and they assume that people with ADHD just don't focus and they're crazy and off the walls. But there's also quiet ADHD, where it's a lot more inner, and it's a lot different, especially for women, which is why a lot of women go undiagnosed, because it's a lot more hard to notice. It's a lot easier to see someone jumping off the walls, especially as kids, young boys. They go crazy. You're like, okay, maybe there's something hyperactive. Whereas quiet ADHD is a lot more like maybe you're fidgeting, but it's different. Anyway, they tested me and they're like, yeah, you do. They wanted to put me on medication for it, but I denied it because, again, at that time I thought medication was bull, to be completely honest. And I denied it. And I honestly didn't believe that I had ADHD at the time because I didn't understand enough about it. I thought it really was someone that just could not focus at all on anything, no matter what. And I was like, I can play RuneScape for hours. Why? How could I have ADHD when that's not really how it works? So up until 2 or 3 years ago, I didn't believe I had ADHD. It was only then when I started to really research it that I was like, oh, okay, I might have this. Okay, they're right. I realized that I have every symptom, including hypersensitivity, which is a very big one for ADHD. And it felt so almost relieving when I realized that it was a symptom of that, because that was when I realized that it wasn't just a me issue. It was actually a disorder an issue that many people have. And that made me feel really good. Not good, but relieved. But anyway, towards the end of high school, I was pretty okay. I still had, the issues of ADHD and the mood swings. The mood swings were still there, but I wasn't as depressed. And like I said, I was starting to get over my bulimia and my eating disorder. And I was really just my issues started to be just typical. My cat's trying to get in. My issues started to be more just typical issues that you have as a college kid and end of high school kid. It was only when I was 22 or 23 that my mental health started deteriorating again. It started to plummet. I was dropping out of college. No, I dropped out of college at 19. Something like that. I had been at a job, so it was probably earlier actually that it started to deteriorate. I was at my first QA job, and I hated it, and I was starting to feel very depressed, and I blamed it on the job. And so I thought, well, I just need to get a better job, one that I don't hate, and that'll solve my problems. And I did. I got a new job, and it was great, and I loved it. I loved it so much, everything about it. But my mental health was still getting worse. It started to plummet, and I was at the point where I was having meltdowns almost every day. I was just bawling my eyes out every single night. And I was taking night classes, and I couldn't focus at all because I just was so depressed. I couldn't focus even when I got help, but I thought it was that. And so I decided as a last resort, because I had tried everything. I tried meditation. I tried eating healthy and going out and changing my lifestyle, and nothing was working. And so my last resort was to go to the doctor again. At this point, I was out of therapy for a long time. Anyway, I go to my doctor and I tell him everything, and he says, let's put you on medication again and see if it helps. And I said, okay. And so I was put on Effexor. Venlafaxine is the other name for it. I was put on 75 milligrams. And the first month was hell, absolutely hell. It was, the side effects of this medication is horrid, but it helped. I noticed changes in me, and my parents noticed changes in me, and everyone did, that I had since I was a kid. My mood swings, my snappiness that I had specifically was almost gone. And that was something that I thought was just a part of me. I thought I was just a bitch. and that was gone. It was almost gone. And that was something I had since I can remember, like since I was a toddler at least. And it was gone, and I wasn't breaking down anymore. It was like I would still feel sad, but it didn't get as intense. It was like there was this glass ceiling where all my emotions would kind of just stop there, and they couldn't get to the next level anymore. And it was nice. It was like, it felt like I could actually control my emotions instead of having panic attacks or meltdowns all the time. And for the next few years, I was good. I was on this medication and my mental health was great up until the end of 2020, when things took a turn for the absolute worst. At the time, I didn't know that I didn't even believe that I had ADHD, but I also did not know that I had other disorders, underlying disorders. I had other disorders that were more long-term. I thought my mental health was cured. I was happy, and this medication caused some side effects that I wasn't a fan of. Specifically, it made me extremely tired at the time. And I didn't like it. I was always sleeping and always napping. And I decided, you know what? I think I'm cured. I don't think I'm depressed anymore. I'm going to try to get off this medication. Doing that mid-COVID, not the best thing. But I got off it, and at first it was okay. And then my mental health started deteriorating again. And I kept ignoring it and blaming COVID and lockdowns, which did not help. I was just stuck in my apartment with my boyfriend at the time. And I was just bawling my eyes out every single day and just having these meltdowns, and I couldn't focus on my work or nothing was enjoyable. Nothing made me I didn't look forward to anything. I hated myself. I hated my life. I hated everything. And I was starting to get snappy again. I started to get very bitchy, to be blunt. And my parents noticed it a lot. My patience and my tolerance for things just went down. And I ended up having issues. I had broken up with my boyfriend and moved to my own place. And it was this roller coaster of just feeling fine and then just plummeting and then fine and then plummeting. And it was like every time I went back down, I went lower. And then I started to see someone who was toxic and did not help with that at all. I'm not going to get into that person. They're irrelevant, but not irrelevant, but I don't want to talk about them. They just, all you need to know is they made it so much worse. But anyway, by now it's the summer, and I saw my doctor again, and I said, this isn't working. I'm freaking out. I was at the point where I would be having a panic attack before my meetings. I would have a call with work, and I would be crying right before, and then I'd have to mute my mic because I'd be crying again, and I had to cancel some meetings because I would just bawl. Sometimes if I made it through the meeting, the moment it was over, I would just cry. I couldn't do anything. It was the worst. I started to have suicidal thoughts. They were very faint, but they were there. And so I went to my doctor and I said, I don't want to be put back on Effexor. It made me so tired. I have energy now, but my mental health is not there. And I brought up to him, I was like, I wonder if maybe I'm bipolar. I had looked it up, and I had fit some of the criteria. Not all of it, but I think it's bipolar 2. There's bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. 1 is someone who has mania, where they're very crazy, and not crazy, but very eccentric when they have mania, and then they go down to depressed. And some of these, they can even see stuff, they can have psychosis and stuff. But then there's bipolar 2, where you get something called hypomania, where you get energy and you feel very like cracked out, to be honest, but it's not as excessive as mania. It's just you can't sleep. Like I said, you feel cracked out, but you don't have as severe mania, but you also have severe depression. So it's kind of like 2 levels of extremes. And I thought maybe I have bipolar 2. And I went there and talked to my doctor and explained all my symptoms and everything. And we had a very, very long talk. And he's been following me for so long at this point. So he knows me really well. And he said it does sound like bipolar disorder, but it sounds more like something called borderline personality disorder. And I didn't know what that was. I did not know what BPD was at the time. And I was like, okay, all right. And so he ended up giving us suggestions and sent me to a psychiatrist. But I couldn't see the psychiatrist for a month. So in the meantime, he had me on a new medication called Wellbutrin. And he also gave me he put me on stress leave from work, sick leave, because I couldn't do it. If anyone who has been on medication knows, medication takes a few weeks to really get into your system, and you can have very rough side effects. So considering how bad my mental health was already, we agreed, since I can't even focus now, that while I'm dealing with the severe mood swings that will come from the medication, I'm going to take time off. I had never done that, and it was extremely hard and embarrassing at the time. There's nothing to be embarrassed about if you need to take time off work for mental health, but I did feel embarrassed. Like I said, I have never done that. I've been working for 10 years, and I've been working full time for like 6 or 7, and I've been working full time for like 8 years. Anyway, either way, it's been a while, a long time, and I was embarrassed. But either way, I did that. I was on the medication, and it was like Prozac. It was useless. It did nothing for me at all. Nothing. I just kept getting worse and worse and worse. I started to feel suicidal. This thought started getting into my head, like, I could just end it. I could just stop this pain. I could stop crying every day. There's nothing to look forward to anyway. And I kept telling myself this every day, and it was like, I would look at the knives in my kitchen for far too long. I would look at my bottle of Tylenol and wonder if I should just down it. I'd be looking it up how many of my Wellbutrin I could take to OD. And it started very small, like once or twice, almost like call to the voids, you know? And it just progressively got worse. Anyway, time came to see the psychiatrist, and he did a huge interview with me, and when it was done, his diagnosis was, in fact, borderline personality disorder. My doctor was right. So I have that. He also suspected that I might also be bipolar. I don't know if I agree with that. As I've learned more about my borderline personality disorder, I don't feel like it's bipolar as well. I think it really is just BPD. I fit that criteria to a T. I unfortunately do. Yeah, I pretty much hit every box for that one. Yeah. And when I was diagnosed, I started to do more research on it, and it was awful. And it's one of the reasons I'm so adamant on helping fight the stigma now, because the amount of awful assumptions that people have on this disorder are terrifying. I never felt more like a piece of garbage than I did when I started to read forum posts about people who know someone with BPD. I felt terrible. I already hated myself. I was already in a terrible place. And then to see so many people calling us insane pieces of garbage, insane, evil, horrible people that just want to see pain and are toxic and abusive, just really set me off. And I really did not want to exist anymore. And after that, I was still trying the Wellbutrin at this time, and it was just not working, but I kept trying. But I started to, that was towards the end of the summer at this point, and I just plummeted more and more and more. I started to, the thoughts that I had about wanting to kill myself were getting so much louder, and so much more welcoming. I would have a breakdown, and it was like I would be holding my knife in my hand, and I'd have it to my skin, and it would take me so much strength to not use it, or look at the bottle of the drugs, or anything. This one time I was over an overpass, and the only 2 reasons I didn't jump was because I was scared. I was too scared, and also because I didn't know if I'd actually die. And that was horrifying to me, to imagine doing that. But all I wanted to do, and it's when you get like that, your thoughts are just so irrational. Looking back now, there are so many reasons I shouldn't kill myself, and especially over an overpass. Like, I wasn't thinking about the people, the drivers that would drive over me. That's awful. And yeah, but you don't think when you are that low, all you want is some sort of comfort. And the only comfort I had was the idea that I might not exist soon. And the small bit of me that was left that stopped me from doing this decided to text the suicide hotline at first. I had contacted the suicide hotline twice in this time. The first time I texted them, and the guy was very nice, and he just distracted me, and we talked about our hobbies, and we laughed at that we both suck at cooking. He said he could only cook eggs, and that helped me that time. The next time I was drinking, and I called. This was the only time I called. And the guy talked to me, and I said I didn't have a plan to kill myself, but the voices are just feeling so welcoming, and I was alone. It was late at night, and I was alone in my apartment. And he told me about this thing called l'autre maison, which means the other home in French. And there's a couple around Montreal, and he said that I could go there whenever I want, and it's basically for people like me that aren't at the point where they need to go to a mental health institution, but enough where they don't want to be alone. And they could go there and spend the night or just hang out, whatever the case is. And I was very close to doing that, but luckily I didn't have to. But I was so close. I had my bag packed and I was ready to go. And for the record, I have a lot of friends and family that were incredibly supportive. The issue is that I was so ashamed about my mental health issues that they didn't know the extent. I would not reach out to them with this stuff almost ever. I was ashamed, and I didn't want them to see me like that. So I had places I could go where I didn't have to be alone. I don't want you guys to think that I had no one, because I did. But I just wouldn't let myself go there. And that was a big issue for me too, is that I'd be spiraling in my bedroom, wanting to die, and there'd be this part of me just telling myself that I'm doing it for attention. And that is something that I constantly battled. It made me feel even worse. I was like gaslighting myself almost. It's like, am I even mentally unstable? Do I really have these disorders, or am I making it up for attention? Because it's the cool thing to do now on the internet. And I was so ashamed of myself. And it took me a lot to really get it in my head that no, these nights that you were alone, that you suffered, were not for attention. It makes no sense. People didn't know about the extent of these. But anyway, I ended up getting off Wellbutrin, and I got out of the toxic relationship that I was in that made me worse than I was. And then my doctor suggested that I get back on Effexor because it worked for me. And he suggested, because my issue with it was that I was always tired, he suggested I go on to a higher dosage. So I was on 75. He put me on 150. And that actually helped. I didn't think it would, but it did. I felt I wasn't as tired. Do I still have symptoms from it? A little bit. Not symptoms, side effects. I have some side effects with Effexor. But it really was life-changing to get back on it, and it made me realize that I'm probably not going to be able to live without this medication. I'm happy that I tried. I think medication should not be your first choice. I think it should be one of the last resorts. But I think that I needed to accept that I have a chemical imbalance in my brain that needs to be sorted. And if it means relying on medication for the rest of my life or wanting to kill myself and probably not living for another year, I'm going to take the medication. And so after that, my life got back together. I still struggle to focus. I still have a lot of issues with my two disorders, ADHD and BPD, but they're not as bad. My mood swings are a lot better. My mental health is a lot more stable, I guess. I'm able to handle myself better. And that's all I can ask for. I'll never be perfect, but that's all I can do. But yeah, that's my mental health. There's a lot more to it probably. But I've been talking for 36 minutes about it, so it's a lot. I'm trying to summarize it all within a video length, but it is my whole life and it's stuff I'm dealing with. But for now, that's my diagnoses. I have BPD and ADHD, and my doctor is following me to make sure that that I don't have any issues with bipolar disorder, because Effexor affects serotonin, and so it can actually cause mania. So if I do have bipolar disorder, it's very possible that it could affect it. And I have had some issues with very high energy levels that could very much be hypomania, but I don't think it's anything crazy. I still don't think I have bipolar disorder. I think I just have BPD and ADHD. And I'm not on any ADHD medication. I never have been, and most kind of don't work with antidepressants because, again, serotonin. But yeah, so that's the first half of this video. Okay, so my camera ran out of memory, and after I cleared it, I decided I'm actually going to stop the video here. I initially planned to do a second part, all talking about more of the symptoms of BPD and ADHD and the stigmas, but I think that they both deserve their own videos. I also, if people want, I can go into a deep dive about my personal experience with these. I know I gave a half an hour video of it just now, but that was more of a journey overall. If you guys want more of the specific symptoms that I've dealt with, I could do that as well. Maybe I can make this like a series, maybe like a mental health Monday or something. I don't know. That'd be kind of cool, actually. And we can make a bunch. I might do that. But for now, that is pretty much the gist of my mental health journey and where I'm at now, sort of. And yeah, anyway, that was my journey. So I'm going to end the video here, and I'll see you guys in the next one. And the next mental health video will be the more of a deep dive into what BPD is. I'll start with that one.